Alright, so the last couple bags, I've changed the way I'm stitching them. So I check my spot here, and because the string passage is so high up, I'm tacking down here at the bottom of the string path, drawstring path, because remember when I pin these, I poke in there and make sure that the seam is pushed out of the way in the correct direction, and I pin it to keep that seam open so that this can go, so that the seam is open on the inside there. But because I don't want to deal with stitching around all these pins, I tack this bottom side to keep that seam open, and then I'm moving up here and doing the top stitch to get all my pins out of the way, and then finishing the 2 stitches for the drawstring passage. That way I'm not distracted with that bottom stitch trying to go around all my pins and getting a crooked one like that bag that I messed up and had to fix the very crooked stitch from going around all my pins. I switched to this spool of blue thread, which is more scavenged thread, which is why it's sometimes having some issues, but it's a big, fat, bright color, and I do like having the clashing color scheme sometimes. I think that rather than going to the effort of making the match happen, it's sometimes more interesting to grab whatever I have for thread colors and just use it and yeah, just use whatever thread colors I have. And see how they clash and turn out. So, but I held that bottom so that seam would be open in there, and now I'm just making my stitches, building them from the edge here. There is a danger to lining each stitch with the last one, because if you make one crooked, then they all end up crooked, but if you are working close to the top edge like this, which is where this drawstring passage ended up, working close to the top edge, or working close to one edge like that, gives you a couple spots to keep an eye out, because you can use your existing stitch lines and also the edge of the bag. So, as you can see, they all came out nice and even, actually. So, but that is the reasoning behind the change I made in my stitch operation on these last few bags. And like this bag, the bottom spot is far enough down that I should be able to avoid all my pins and put that first stitch in. And part of the reason I like doing that first stitch is that the lower stitch first when I work is because if there's a mismatch or now the word's going to escape me. If I have to put a tuck in, then I can put the tuck in on the bottom and top stitch, and then when I put the center line in, the center stitch between the two to finish this passage, it can account for that tuck a little better. Whereas if you work from one end, from the top down at a big spacing like this, as you work, you're gently twisting the liner inside the shell here, and by the time you get to the last stitch, when you're going on these long runs, it'll build that tuck to be even bigger if you start from this end and work in. So when there's room, I do this end first because that reduces the amount of twisting that happens between the liner and the shell as you work. So hopefully that explanation made sense. That's actually, like, that twisting is only a problem when you're lazy and don't pin things properly or iron them the way that I do. So if you dutifully iron and pin everything, then that twisting that I'm working to avoid right now to reduce the tucks isn't as big an issue. But since I don't do the ironing and don't do the pinning that works to prevent that twisting between the two pieces and that tuck, then when I'm working this far from the edge, I need to put that far seam in first, and then I can work between the edge and that established seam there. So go. Alright, now, I did end up with a tiny wrinkle here, but if I had started at this edge here and worked in 1, 2, 3, then each time I worked, this wrinkle tuck that's being stitched here, because the top and bottom get pushed slightly differently by the feet under the feed dog underneath pulls the bottom piece, and of course the reason you pin is so that the pin keeps the bottom and top together as they get pulled. Because I'm not ironing and pinning this spot down here, as you work from top to bottom like this, 1, 2, 3, each time the feed dogs pull the inside a little bit and twist it, and so instead of this wrinkle here lining up like this, it will end up on an angle, and you'll end up with a tuck here and a tuck there, and this bottom tuck will get bigger as it stretches and twists these out of alignment, the liner and the bag shell out of alignment. So that's why when it's that far away like this and there's room, I always start with this first one out here, or the bottom one. I start with the bottom one for number 1, because that pairs everything up, and then everything is held better and prevents that twist. So anyhow, that's the last of those. As I finish all this up and try to get my sewing out of the way for the new toy that came in the mail that has already appeared on the channel, but it's too cold outside, what with it being 0 degrees Fahrenheit, to go outside and play.